Hey, everybody. I know you're all filtering in to the live session we're having right now. And before I get into our discussion, which I think is super exciting, I know we were talking just before the session, my own personal keen interest in this integration. This makes for a really unique session, too, today. Instead of one voice and one presentation, we got three experts kind of share their opinions and expertise about this integration of xAPI into existing ecosystems. So in a few minutes, I'll introduce everybody. But again, I'm Mark Britz, the Director of Event Programming at the Guild. Excited to be here once again. And a couple things to go through, a little bit of housekeeping. I want to share with you, of course, is the xAPI User Conference. If you haven't already looked into the details on this, at DevLearn this year, on Tuesday, October 24th. You'll have this opportunity for a really deep dive into xAPI. There's also the xAPI Accelerator, which if you're new to xAPI is a great experience as well as a one-day event. We have the Learning and Analytics, not just xAPI, online conference coming up. So if you want to broaden your knowledge around data and analytics, look into our online event, the two-day event on September 27th and 28th. And of course, as you guys have been hearing all along in Slack and other places, our xAPI party is scheduled for November 2nd. This is a chance for all of you guys who are working on what we call project teams, how you're learning, things you're experimenting with or doing. It's a great opportunity to share. So you want to make sure that you submit to that by October 6th so we can look through and see what we have in the space and time that we'll have to showcase all your great work. And just keep in mind the things I mentioned on the front end about, the conference coming up at DevLearn, our events that happen in Orlando, our online events. You can find out all of this, of course, if you're a member of the Guild, right? So you become a free member of the Guild, and you can get the communications that tell you all about the exciting publications, our event discounts, webinars, anything that's recorded, and of course, this xAPI cohort and all the details about that. If you are interested at the end of the session today, time permitting, if you want to share where you're at with your team and things you're working on, Karen is here behind the scenes, so you can ping her in the chat and say, yeah, you'd love to step up on stage. If we don't get anybody today, that's fine. I think as we get closer to the end of the session, I'll kind of inquire if anybody's out there to do that. Otherwise, we'll wrap up. So check with Karen and see if you want to come up on stage and share what your project, what's happening in your project. So anyways, I want to make sure we maximize all our time with our experts today. Our panel sessions on integrating xAPI into the existing ecosystem. I'm going to be the host today, so I get to ask all the great questions. And of course, the audience, if you guys have something, I'll be monitoring the chat while our experts are kind of sharing their insights and ideas on this topic. But I do want to turn things over to our three panelists just to kind of share with everybody who's in attendance what they do in regards to xAPI, who they do it with, and of course what their keen interests are in this space. So I'm just going to go around the room here real quick. And Alfonso, I'm gonna put you on the spot to share a little bit about your background and what you're working on.
Thank you, Mark. So my name is Alfonso Riley, and I'm a digital program manager over in Caterpillar, working with our business unit, Global Dealer Learning. So Global Dealer Learning is responsible to work with our dealers into developing their key workforce. So really, we focus on providing learning products and services to our dealer audience into the development of key strategic goals in the effort of sustaining what is our business strategy across superior product support and a measurable performance on our equipment. So specifically in my case, I work in the global dealer learning environment. We have a team that is solely dedicated to EdTech. So it's the learning systems. And we started like everybody else, like around 16 years ago, we had an LMS. We started with an LMS as an extended enterprise to our dealers. And then around 8 years ago, then we started looking at the concept of learning beyond the LMS, and especially for extended enterprise. And that's where a lot of the talk around xAPI came to it, because specifically the specification was made for capturing what's doesn't happen in an LMS, and it's still part of the performance and learning behavior outside the formal training. So
Mhm.
in that, I was brought in with a background of being an instructor, technical instructor, and then also an engineering background to work on the learning analytics part with a learner record store as we were onboarding our vendor, and then connecting all of this with our different apps and making sure then that using xAPI as our spec to transmit all this information and then normalize it, we could get that learning analytics platform. And then with that, we have achieved a lot of things through time, specifically into gaining practically. We haven't grown on the amount of people that are involved in our programs from theater. Probably 7 years ago, we were talking about 30,000 users, and our total population is 250,000.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're talking about an annual engagement of around 135,000 users touching our systems and engaging with our programs and different learning modalities. So, and that I can attribute a lot of the success of the implementation of integrating xAPI to show the value of our offerings and show the value of what we were doing. So,
fabulous. Thank you. Sarah, how about yourself?
Get unmuted here. So my name's Sarah Mercier, and I am the CEO of Build Capable, previously Learning Ninjas. So many of you in the cohort have seen me around before in previous cohort sessions. So we work in 3 areas. We implement and augment learning ecosystems for our clients. And we design and develop online learning solutions, of course. And we also develop data strategies, which is where a lot of our work in xAPI comes in. Although I say that, and xAPI spans all 3 of our service areas. So essentially, we work with our clients to make sure that people get the training that they need and that the business can determine whether or not it was successful. And that's what we use xAPI for. I like to say that I'm a generalist in this space because I've done everything from in-person training to online learning to mobile devices and apps. And the clients that we work with range from in-profit, nonprofits, inside the organization, external audiences, training the general public. We work internationally. So I have examples all over the board of different types of projects we've done. And the interesting thing about xAPI is it's super, super flexible so that you can capture whatever it is you need. The thing that I will kind of leave you all with before you go to Julian is that you have to know what you're looking for before you can use xAPI to start doing anything with it. So I actually spend a lot of my xAPI time trying to get people to focus on what they're actually trying to learn about what people are doing with their training, and helping people write good learning objectives that are measurable. So if you don't know what you want people to do with the information, then you're not going to be able to measure what people do with it. So I'll leave with that and turn it over to Julian.
Perfect. Julian, your turn.
Well, I'm going to say good morning to everyone because it is 4 o'clock in the morning here in Brisbane, Australia. So I've had my coffee, so we're all good. So my name is Julian Davis. I'm head of digital learning for a relatively new company here in Australia called Qualnet Technology. So we're a veteran startup company. I am very much the technical aspect of xAPI. I've been working with it now for 2016, something like that. I started. I was working for a registered training organization where we really wanted to know more about what our students were doing because it was a distance learning education provider, and we were doing our own. We were doing a mishmash of all these different statistics from different places, and then I really just happened to stumble across xAPI and just how simple and, as Sarah said, flexible it is. It just grabbed me, and then I was and I've developed multiple projects since and integrated it into existing systems and new systems, and now I'm designing digital ecosystems as well, digital learning systems, and implementing it. And the big thing that I like is what Sarah said, is the flexibility of what you can do with it. So I'm looking forward to sharing a couple of projects that I've worked on.
Perfect. And I know that everybody who's in attendance is very interested in the practical applications around this. So let's dig in a little bit, because I think the old saying is you kind of start with why. And my first question to you, and feel free anyone to jump in and dovetail anywhere it goes. And audience, of course, anybody's listening, I'll be watching the chat. So if you have other questions I'm not asking, feel free to put them there. I'll definitely be glancing over. So the question is simple. It's like, how can organizations benefit, from integrating xAPI into their existing digital learning platforms? What are the benefits that we're looking at doing by doing this? Who'd like to start?
I'll go first. Looking at it from this perspective and the experience we had. So I think the first thing, as Sarah mentioned, is first thing you need to be clear is what you're looking for and what you try to achieve. So this is a part of having clear vision and having clear goals on what you're trying to get with your specifically when you start looking from the business strategy, your business goals, and translating it over to your learning and development goals. So really, if that is not set, it's very difficult to justify anything with xAPI, because really xAPI is just a tool. You can use it. It's very flexible. It's very practical, but just as flexible, if you put garbage in, garbage is going to come out. So if you don't have a clear focus on what you want to achieve, what decisions, so in the data framework is what decisions you need to make and what is the data you need to make that decision, needs to be clear before onboarding on getting your ecosystem or your data framework on your learning systems and how you're going to capture the data. That's the first thing that needs to be set on. Once you and that's really the business case that you got to drive to upper management. In the case of my organization, is driving, what do you want to achieve? In our case, the key thing strategy was, we want to make our technician do the job the first time, all the time, right? And then is what are the different elements you need to measure that success? Now we got business metrics around that. So we know about the business. Caterpillar is a heavily focused data under the business data. But then it's coming on what are the different learning programs you have, and then how those learning programs connect with those business results. And really, that's where xAPI enabled us by looking at our applications, how we're going to collect the data, making it easier. And then having a clear strategy on how you're going to do your storytelling around the data and provide insights. And that at the end, that's the story that you got to bring to your stakeholders and your sponsors around this is making the data, the BI simple enough that it's not like black magic. It's something that you can implement if you got the right tools in place, you got the right strategy. You got to focus on the strategy. Once you get your strategy in a stage that it gives you clarity on what you're trying to achieve, everything else is going to be it's going to be easier because you're going to have focus, you're going to know where to invest and all that. So that's where always it has to start. And then look at xAPI. And when you start going down into the xAPI, making sure that you understand what the protocol is. So then comes the technical part, understanding how you capture the data, how you process the data, which those two are the most difficult parts on the journey. And then looking at how you're going to visualize it. And usually everybody starts with visualizing. And I will say it, visualizing is the easy part because everybody does that. Marketing took care of that. So it's mostly getting the data right so you can actually visualize it and make decisions on it.
Yeah, I can piggyback off of that too, Alfonso. I thought that was beautifully said. I often, actually, I've even in presentations in this cohort before have said the first question you need to ask is what questions do you have right now that aren't being answered by your current training data? And, are there what are the things that you want to know that you don't know? And that can start to give you an idea of starting to brainstorm. What are some of the questions that are unanswered? The other big thing too is that, you mentioned, Mark, that it's like, well, how do businesses benefit from this? And that's very specific to your business, right? You have to understand what you're trying to achieve. And when you go in and put these questions together, just like Alfonso said, and trying to visualize those, I'll often get into conversations around design because there are two big things that folks will often come to me with. They either want to know the answer to a business question. So we're trying to invest more in this, or we need to know if we should spend our money here in this program, or should we spend it there, or those types of decisions. The other question that gets asked a lot is, I want to improve my training. So are you evaluating what the performance is of your learners, or are you evaluating your training content? Because you can do both with xAPI. I can say, oh, well, I made a really dumb design decision here, and everybody's skipping over this video, like nobody's watching this video. Why? Right? So it can also give you questions to ask and follow up on about your actual content. So I start to think about some of these things when you put together your data strategy, when you put together these questions. What are you really trying to find out? Are you trying to improve your training solutions, your learning solutions, or are you trying to answer a business question, or both, right? And I work with nonprofits a lot, and they're working with external audiences. These people don't work for them. They don't report to them. They're not required to do anything. And so a lot of them just want to have more insight into what people care about, what they don't care about, what's useful to them, what's not. So there's a lot that you can do with it, and some of it can be exploratory, but you got to have a pretty good understanding. You have to have a really good understanding of what it is you're trying to train, and what are your goals, both for your audience and also for yourself, and improving your own content.
Yeah,
Julian,
I have to agree with all of that. There's not a great deal I can add to that. I mean, I'm listening to what Sarah and Alfonso are saying, and I've just got my technical hat on right now about the use of the tool, so xAPI as a tool, which Alfonso said. And the analogy that I've used in the past is there's multiple ways to take a nut off a bolt. You can use pliers, a wrench, what we call a shifter or adjustable wrench, socket. Which one's going to do the best job? Yeah, that's where coming up with your business decisions, what it is that you want to get out of your learning, how much more granular information do you want to get out? And I guess also I started thinking, it's probably leading into something else, but is what have you currently got in your ecosystem, and will it support it? Right. And that's the other thing that you really, really need to start thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, those are, I mean, you guys have bled into a little bit of like some of the challenges that are faced. Obviously the front end is like, what is the goal? Making sure you've identified that all the stakeholders are on board, and obviously talking about the gaps. What is the gap between where you're at, where you want to be? Sarah mentioned, for example, finding out more about your training might be what's being called into it. But one of the things I think comes up too is like, you're going to have people in the organization who are not as technical as you are. And these are your key stakeholders, the people you have to win over, to move ahead on a project. I think everybody here would be interested in knowing, how do you have that conversation? How do you help communicate these benefits? And of course, the challenges you might have to overcome to these non-technical folks who hold the keys.
Yeah, that's really, really good. Something I've learned over time is to describe everything in buckets. So I've found that you can sell people things, because to a degree you almost become a salesperson, is that you have to try, and that this tool, xAPI, is the right tool to achieve what they need to for the business outcome or the learning analytics. And the best way to get it to the non-technical people is to show them. But if you were to start showing them, going, here's a JSON file, go and have a look at this, their eyes are just going to glaze over, and they're just not going to understand it. So to actually take the time to do something very quickly, and Sarah touched on the video and understanding what somebody's doing in a video, which I get a lot of people asking me about the video. It seems to be almost the flagship of xAPI, of what you could do by understanding what people are doing in a video within learning content. Yeah, you do have to go into you can't dazzle them with all the brilliance of all the analogies and acronyms and everything else. You do need to take a step back and be able to actually sell it to them. And yeah, using bucket analogy, drawings on a whiteboard. So simple block diagrams on a whiteboard, going old school for new technology, still works. It still works.
I actually, so I saw Becky's in the session today, and I saw her presentation at, was it DevLearn last year, where she was talking about the compliance. You can jump in and chat if you want. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that, you know, you have these conversations. We as instructional designers and developers and stuff, we have these conversations with the business all the time, with our stakeholders, with supervisors, managers, whoever it is you're working with, right? And they say, well, we really have this need, in her case, like for compliance. We need to make sure that everybody gets an hour of compliance, whatever, every year. And there are a lot of ways we can go about doing that. And historically, we've said, okay, we're going to sit them down in front of some e-learning. We're going to not let the next button come up until 3 minutes have passed, then they can click it. And we're going to say this person was forced to sit through 60 minutes of this whatever time. Or we can just let people have control of their own stuff and use xAPI to track training in the background to see how much time people are spending on things. And video is a good example of that she had used in her project, you know, having the ability to track and see how much time are actually people spending in these compliance videos, being able to track it in the background instead of forcing bad design on people to meet a compliance requirement. And so one of the things that I really like about xAPI is instead of forcing bad design decisions on people, we can actually track these data in other ways, and we can be more creative about the way that we design our training and capture answers to questions about whether people get something or not, or whether they've practiced something or not, or been exposed to something or not. Because you know, I've had clients ask me, okay, well, what do you want to do with xAPI? Well, can we track and see every accordion that they drop down? Well, sure, you can, but what will you do with that information? Well, I just want to know that they've looked at it. Okay, sure. If that's important to you, great. What are you trying to do with the information that's in that accordion drop down? What should they be able to do with that information? Then could we maybe create a relevant practice activity around that? And that might be more meaningful to track than whether or not they looked at an accordion drop down, which doesn't actually tell us that they did anything with that information or they understand how to use it. And so it's really getting into making better design decisions and thinking about how xAPI opens that up to us. Because if the only thing you can track is whether somebody passed a multiple choice question or clicked on a whole bunch of screens, then it's really not giving you very meaningful data. You can track that stuff, and it might give you a data point for something, progress, you know, exposure to content, that's fine, but it's only one tiny little piece of a picture. And so getting very clear about what you're trying to achieve, that's what's super important. And understanding why, like Alfonso said, garbage in, garbage out. I can capture data on everything. As a matter of fact, a lot of our e-learning tools are going to send, if you turn xAPI on, all the default stuff, it's going to send all kinds of statements. I experienced a page. Woo! How exciting. I experienced it and then I left it. And it's going to send that every single page I go to, right? Well, that's great and fine and all, but that doesn't really tell us much, does it? And if we can be clear about what it is we're trying to learn, then we can be more intentional about what other times in this training would I want a statement to be sent, data to be sent to say, Sarah also did this other thing that's more relevant than experiencing or leaving a page. So, you know, it's kind of thinking about that. So Mark, getting into, I'm not talking to in technical terms. It's just, what do you want to know? Right. Yeah. And then let all the technical people figure that out. Let us put those pieces together. I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but let us get it for you. You just tell us what you're looking to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
No problem,
and
Dan. Go ahead.
yeah, and I think on Sarah's and Julian, and just to kind of like wrap up on that specific one, the conversation, just say when you're working with non-technical people, don't bring technical terms into the conversation. I think it always have to go high level. I think one of the process, I saw that from some of our learning analytics platforms and kind of guidelines and different job aids. Like start with the program and what are your program goals? In this case, what are your learning program goals? And let's look at your business KPIs and understand and ask questions about what is it that you're trying to achieve, and then how you capture that information, and then trying to understand the behavior around it, and then how you're going to deploy your program, how you're going to collect the data, and having the understanding about it, and then figuring it out. And this is merely from the learning analytics and the standpoint is, when you're collecting the data, is defining how you're going to measure, asking those questions at a high level, and then you slowly lowering down. It's like, and looking at the different stage of the learning process. It's looking, I come up like the end goal with the program. Then I start going at performance. Are you going to be tracking performance or not? Can you track performance or not? In the case of ours, as we provide extended learning in our programs to the extended enterprise, like performance data, because of privacy and all others, we cannot collect that. So our dealers are the ones who have to know that data, and then we got to figure out how we interpret it. Usually we look at it at an organizational level, not at an individual level. Mm-hmm. And then it's going from that performance to the learning experience. What is the data you need from the learning experience? So what you want to figure out about the learning experience. And we frame it in 3 buckets, just like Julian said. So one is, okay, so you want to know readiness. So you want to know if your people are ready, and define how you're going to measure your readiness. It could be by simple standards of completions and all that, like, hey, they completed this learning, completed the program, and that just telling you, okay, they went through they started a readiness journey. Then it's really then you go into the part of engagement, like really, are they engaging with the content? Are they adopting the content? And then you start going to learning experience, the quality of the experience. Are you seeing trends? Are you seeing the patterns? And that's more on the instructional design team, the learning team, evaluating the data to then quickly act. And that's also an opportunity where AI can help out with the generative AI. And then obviously is the learning impact, is the end result. They're achieving. Usually that you do it by either assessment strategies and your certification strategies together with the job performance. If you don't have a certification, then you're doing assessments and collecting data on the job performance and evaluating that. So keeping it in those terms without going into too much technical and simplifying the metrics that you're going to use helps out in the conversation. And obviously from us being the experts on the technology and how we collect the data, we can identify, xAPI definitely is a way. xAPI, well, it may be difficult. We could use xAPI, but the platform or the element or the ecosystem you have doesn't enable it. And then it comes into, do I need to make an investment decision, or do I need to work upgrades with my learning technology, or even if I need a process change, I'll make a decision on the process on how I execute our learning programs. And that conversation makes more sense for them than going straight on, hey, xAPI is about collecting actor verb object, and we can do extensions, and I can give you a JSON file with all the data I can collect from you, and we can transform it, and we can collect it, and we can do it with IoTs, we can do it with a mobile device, and then it's just like, boom, you're blown. You don't know what you're talking about.
So, I mean, as I hear all of you talking in very general terms about this communication and the ways to go about it, it says to me that there's some story here. You've had examples of probably working with organizations, maybe your own, or maybe in Sarah's case, others. And I'd be curious to hear a little bit more detail about organizations who you've worked with, or in your own stories, in your own places, where it's gone well. Who has done this right? can you share with us some real life examples? Anybody want to start us off?
I can go.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll talk about maybe two. There's a project that I'm working on right now where we are working on it's a little more complex than most e-learning type projects, but it's a serious comic game style learning solution that is mobile only. So it's mobile first. And we are putting this together for parenting skills. So it's for parents of at-risk teenagers. And this particular project, it's for an external audience. And these parents are going through and making decisions throughout different scenarios about how they would respond to a teenager. Which is hilarious. I've actually learned a lot being the mom of 3 boys. So as you go through these different decision points, one of the things that was really important was for us to understand what decisions were they making and how they responded. We're using some of that data in the future in order to channel other information to them. So paths through the content. It's also really important for them to do some basic things like, how confident do you feel right now dealing with your teenager? Okay, now you've been through some stuff. Now, how confident do you feel? And being able to rate yourself and getting that information immediately, right, in a consistent format so that can be visualized later. So there are a lot of different pieces in there that we're tracking. Now, in order for us to get that right, we had to have super clear learning objectives. And we had to make sure that everything was tied back to that. So when you make that decision point, what learning objective is that satisfying? And can we now say that they have a better understanding of that, or whatever the learning objective was, whatever the measurable result was that we're looking for? And so we were having to design that around those pieces. Now, this is only one piece of a much larger multi-year project, and they have to use this information to prove, hey, funders give us more money for future years to continue to fund this project and build it out with additional scenarios and different topic areas and that kind of thing. So this is super important to have good data to show whether or not they were meeting those different requirements. So that's one example that we're working on right now. And it's super exciting. I'll tell you right now, it was so easy for me to program the xAPI part of it, because we already had a clearly defined data strategy for what it was that we needed to measure. And I have to give props to Wendy Morgan, because I worked with her on this project, and she's just fantastic at putting these things together. So talking about collaboration with other folks, being able to work as a team to put these strategies together is very important. Another example that I have is I work with an organization, and I think Rory might be in here, but I work with a financial benefits services organization where they provide benefits to organizations all over the US. And they don't have a learning platform. So they're not capturing anything other than Google Analytics on their learning stuff. And so they deliver it on their website, and they're just capturing page views basically and some traffic, but only really that somebody opened it, and that's it. And they know where they came from. So they wanted to have a better understanding of what people were doing inside of it. And as a benefits organization, things like around tax season, how many people are using different tax resources in their course, right? How many people are going and they have call to actions in the different parts of their courses. How many people are actually going out there and doing that? Are they converting people? So they had lots of different business goals that were tied to their training. And they had no way to collect it until we started using xAPI. And so that was a pretty complex project. We also, all their stuff, well, the majority of their stuff is built in Articulate Rise. So we were having to go in and manipulate those files to actually send meaningful statements for what we wanted to get out of those courses. So, but that helped them make decisions. So when we were finished with that first project and we showed them their dashboard of all the data that they're now getting, which we set up those visualizations, Alfonso, based on their data strategy, right? But once they were able to see what data they were getting, they were like, oh my gosh, and we need to do this course, and this is what we want to know about this one, and we need to do this course, and this is what we need to know about this one. So being able to, I know we talk about pilot projects and these cohorts all the time, but that's the benefit of doing a pilot project if you do it well, is being very specific about what you're trying to get out of it and demonstrating, here's what we can learn about this stuff. Then it helps people make that connection to other things they're working on and how you might be able to use it in other situations.
Excellent examples. Excellent. Gentlemen, do you have other ones you want to share? Anything else that would add to what Sarah's experience was working with her case, external clients, so external or internal?
Happy to jump in on a quick one, and I get a lot, and I think it's still going around, is SCORM. Everyone uses SCORM. We love SCORM. We won't change from SCORM. We don't want to change from SCORM. But the fact that you can, and I did see in the chat there talking about having statements in Storyline and how do you turn them off or how do you customize them? You can customize them with a little bit of work, but a previous global EV charging company that I used to work for, we had a lot of external clients from the training, from the technical training perspective, want to host the training in their own LMS, but we were issuing the licenses to be able to say that they've actually completed the training, but they wanted to host it. So how are we going to find out when someone has actually completed the training to be able to award them a license? So we used xAPI. So within the learning management system, built a very, very simple tool that polls and looks for a particular activity. So we know what the activity was, we know what the course was, we check to see that that person has completed it, and then we run through a series of processes to award them a license. And that became very, very popular, and we started actually getting a lot of other companies that said, oh, we just want to host your training ourselves. So it's a better user experience. We don't have to send someone off to another platform to go and do more training. It's all within something that they're familiar with. And adult learning, we know that adults don't like to deviate away from things too much. They like to sit in their little comfort zone. So by utilizing that, we were able to award technicians licenses throughout the year. So that worked quite well.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Excellent story. Alfonso, anything from you? Anything you want to share or can share? I guess I should ask.
Yeah, I think I will add on what Julian was saying, and specifically that, and it brings a case that we did, especially on what we deploy with our dealers, because our dealers, and specifically that, like the dealers at that point, like I said, almost 20 years ago, they had to come to our platform to take our learning. And as dealers evolve, they mature their infrastructure, especially in ERPs, having their own LMS, having their own learning experience platform, and managing their own learning and development, which, again, they are responsible for that. Then comes the challenge of, you're taking learning in different places, and how you aggregate and make sure you have a central location for those records, and make sure you can then provide credit for it, regardless of where you're taking the learning. And that's where the xAPI really helps out, as we allow the content to be accessed to other platforms, not our LMS. So we don't have that information there. And that's where the learner record store plays a key element, together with xAPI, in which we create the packages that then report back to us wherever they are. Now, additional, we got also access control feature, but that's another topic on the technology side on how we do that. But the key thing is we managed to provide that flexibility to our dealers, in which we provide them. We got our program delivery platform, so you can come take the program here then we offer you, well, if you want to use our content and develop your own development plans, we give you the option, and you can use it in your own platform, manage it yourself. It's your responsibility. You got control of that. And xAPI allow us to then make sure we get the data of how our content is being used and evaluate the experiences around that. So that is one of the cases on we're really leveraging that architecture, and xAPI being part of allowing us to do that, help out.
So as I listen to you guys, one thing that pops in my mind too is this. It's like, Sarah, I'll speak to you more specifically, is like you help out with these projects, you have an external client and you've done your job, but it needs to be supported. There might be maintenance requirements. Things change over time. The question really to the group is, what types of training might be necessary, or support, afterwards, to make sure that's as effective as it is from the onset.
So it's kind of a loaded question. We actually, this is one of the reasons why we built learnxapi.com. We actually it's a public course, right? But we built it for our clients because we kept having to explain the same thing over and over again to lots of different stakeholders. And so now we're like, take the course, then we'll talk. So we just kind of took them through that. We got really good at it, at explaining the same thing over and over again. But I'll say that probably the most important thing is having someone responsible, like a key person for governance. And because somebody needs to keep up with a profile for how you're using xAPI in your organization. Like, how are you using different verbs? How are you setting up your objects? Like having some consistency, because let's say that there are 3 people on a team. And one person uses the verb, played, and the other one uses a verb started or whatever. And so you have people using the same verbs or different verbs for the same activity, the same type of activity. And so you've got to have some consistency across your teams in your organization for how you're using this stuff. Otherwise, your analytics is going to get all junked up later. You've got to have folks that are going to be someone that's going to be involved in bringing your stakeholders together. So I think that often that person ends up being some, very motivated instructional designer that tries to pull everything together and may not always be the most ideal person just because of maybe your role or the level of the organization. And so I do think it's really important to have someone that is the point person for this. But, who all needs to be involved depends on the size of your organization, your ecosystem setup, how you're using xAPI. Like there's a lot to that. So, it may be helpful to actually bring someone in to consult you on it. I'm a huge advocate of doing stuff yourself because I'm a do-it-yourselfer. But I do think for something like this, it might be helpful to have someone consult you through that process and help you set that up and make some recommendations to get you started. So that way, what does need to be maintained, who does need to be responsible for what, where does this stuff need to live, where's our source of truth, where can it be public enough in the organization so that people can access our strategies and our profile and make sure that everything's consistent. So, it's just, there's not one answer to that question, which is why I said it's kind of loaded. But you do have to make those decisions. And if it's something that you don't know what you don't know, you might want to get some consulting to help through that process just to get started. It's not hard, but there's just a lot to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Other thoughts on support and training needs, gentlemen?
Yeah. So, and just like Sarah pointed out, it's not easy to respond like this a one-size-fits-all answer on this one, because it depends on your organization, your culture. That's a key one, the culture, and then how all of that fit into your business strategy. And I will say governance, definitely. The starting point is governance to keep sanity, because that's the thing around all of this is sanity. Because if you start letting everybody cook their own stuff and, different recipes on the xAPI profiles, and the data starts getting convoluted. And then, for example, at one point when I was onboarding all of this, I had the background. I understood what was done over in the different system. I understood how the programs were deployed. But getting somebody that can understand all of stuff and be able to interpret the data as well is not an easy task. So usually having a governance committee, a group of people, because it cannot be one person. I think there should be a leader on the governance, but it's not a group. It's not one person role. It's probably a committee or a council group that makes sure that the governance is applied and takes a look from all the stakeholders around the learning programs or the learning and development programs. And then the thing is, really has to be multidisciplinary, because in one case on our side, one key thing that has grown more in time on our maintenance of our ecosystem is a cybersecurity threat, and then data privacy. So those two things have heightened with the COVID pandemic and how we manage the digital ecosystem. So, and then protecting all the integrity of the data that you're getting with xAPI, which in part you're getting PII around that, is how you ensure your data is not corrupted, and then you're making the right decisions around it. So that's one part, versus all the other part on your design, the design of your content, and how you're define the profiles to understand that data and then analyze it and process it. So that part is key, and I heighten the importance of governance across all of that as an important element that needs to be in place to make it sustainable.
Governance, expertise, bringing outsiders in to help guide those decisions. Julian, anything you would add to
No,
this?
not really. Is the only thing that I would add is part of your team. You want to have IT on board. That's because you are talking, as Alfonso touched on there, on the security and the cyber aspect, is your learning record store and how it's going to feed through firewalls and all those kind of things. Is you need to understand that. So you're going to need to have someone who does understand that. So make friends with your ICT team. Talk the talk with them, because you'll get a long way from that. That's something that I've experienced over time. Is be as transparent as you can, particularly with your IT team.
Good advice. Good advice. Governance came up, and that got me thinking. I know, Alfonso, you touched on a little bit about security and data security. We're talking about integration of xAPI in organizations and various technology integration with that. So the question I would ask the group too is around that. We've had topics of discussion in this cohort, but I want to have you guys have a chance to chime in a little bit. But how can we, make sure or ensure that our data that's captured the xAPI is secure? What are those practices that we need to undertake in the organizations for that, especially when we talk about issues around ethical use of data and things along those lines?
Well, I'll bring my case, because practically that's my day-to-day meetings. I'm looking at cybersecurity from the enterprise standpoint, because like good example, just what happened with MGM and the cybersecurity threat they had this week, and it's costing them 30 million. Caesar paying $50 million for the ransomware. So it is for upper management, cybersecurity is a real deal. So a lot of that is obviously getting acquainted with your IT department, because most of the time, we don't want to talk, especially with risk management and cybersecurity. That's not usually the people you have on your speed dial. You usually don't like when they start snooping around and really. But it's looking at your enterprise brand and understanding the different practices that are being in place. A lot of the pandemic brought up the need for cybersecurity experts around all the organizations, because we're more digital than ever. And it's understanding then based on that, because xAPI is leveraging what is already built in the internet. So it's understanding that and understanding the different protocols, practices, One key thing is identity and what is identity and access management, which is a key thing for corrupting those records, and specifically with some of the rules around xAPI that you cannot. One of the requirements to be a compliance LRS is that you cannot modify the statement. You can add to it, but you cannot modify the statement. So that gives you some data integrity as when you're working with applications that are in conformance with ADL. So it's looking at those certificates, especially for your vendors, identifying that they have a certified LRS when they're providing the data, because that gives you a guarantee on what level of quality you're going to get on your data. When you start working with vendors that, they're not conformance, they're working, they're experimenting, then you start getting into those, black hole moments in which anything could go wrong if something changes on the platform, and then give you bad data, and you're not going to notice because, like Sarah mentioned, if your profile and your activity, like from one single interaction with your course where you're generating 20 statements per minute, and then you multiply that by 20,000 people touching that, you're getting zillions of statements in a minute, and it can easily get muddy on your data lake, on your learner record store. And when you start doing your analytics, all of a sudden you start seeing behaviors that are not real, and that's the thing. Also, it is all a part on, especially when you're talking about credentialing and licensing. And I know in Australia that's a big thing on accreditations and credentials, is validation of records and keeping those records active and making sure, you when you're even coming to a court, you can get sued, and you're looking at training records. The integrity of the training record is important to keep it. So the learning record store, how you manage the record, how you collect the data is important, and that you got in place the systems there. And for example, blockchain has been something that has been talked a lot about on using for credentialing and ensuring that it cannot be manipulated. So there's a lot of topics that go beyond on the IT world itself that come into place into the learning technology piece that we got to be aware of. We don't need to be experts. We just need to be aware of it, and then identify the experts either inside the organization or outside, if we're a small size company, to look at it and keep it in. But always have that in the back of your mind when you're working in a digital platform, that cybersecurity is where your biggest risk of your business is going to come over for your ecosystem.
Very good. Julian or Sarah, is there anything you want to add in terms of the data security conversation, things that people should be aware of?
I'll just add like the quick version because Alfonso covered it. I think that, from my perspective, I work with a lot of people who are wanting to advocate for xAPI, and they are just e-learning designers and developers. And all I would recommend is know that you're working with data, right? I would recommend using de-identified data when you're doing your plan around and not putting in real data into this stuff. You be careful about getting into your learning platform and plugging in user data and that kind of stuff. You can anonymize the actor data, and then there's not really any data for there to be, right? Be careful about what you've got in for your object IDs and things like that. So make sure that you don't have any kind of company data in there that might be security risk. So just being aware of it, like Alfonso said, is the most important part, and just being careful when you're playing around, because when you get serious about it, you need to partner with IT. I know we hate doing that in some companies because it's a lot of work and collaboration, but you've got to do it when you're doing something like this. So bringing them in and letting them go through, they know what the vendors need to have. They know what the vendor specs need to be to work with their organization and their other platforms. So let them handle that part of it.
Yep, I'm going to agree with everything. That's. I haven't got a great deal more to add. As Sarah said, yeah, the actor, as long as it conforms to the spec, you can DI it. So you don't. Yeah, as long as it conforms to the spec, you're good. And if you're not looking for a specific person and you're looking more for trends, then that's the way you want to go.
So we are slightly over our time, but it's been a really engaging conversation. So I apologize to everybody out there. If you can stick around, this has been very cool. But I know I want to end today a little bit with something that came up. Harley has been asking a few questions, and it gets into the practical stuff a little bit too. And I want to share one of her questions. Now, I'll ask our panelists here, if you can, when the event is over, you're free to answer any of the questions that you saw in the chat and stuff, and the attendees can re-engage. So we might not have hit everything that's there. But I love this question, and I'm really curious if you guys want to tackle it. Harley asked this. I don't know if you guys see it, but it says, what are some of the examples of how xAPI has influenced the design of your instructional systems? For example, describe when xAPI has compelled you to change something about your course based on that aha moment from using xAPI. I'd really be curious if you had that experience.
I have some really good ones, but I have a quick one that comes to mind. For the organization that I already mentioned. It was the one that's doing benefits services, and they had a survey that they had at the end of each one of their courses, and they had it kind of buried at the very end, and you couldn't even complete the course until you went to it. So the way that it was designed, it didn't even give you course completion. And so they kept seeing on their dashboard a drop off for the surveys, because people thought that when they saw the survey, they were done and they just closed it out. So they were not doing the survey, but they also weren't doing the next piece of, there was like something else that was after it that was important. And so they ended up, I said, look, you've got people dropping off constantly here. So that we did two things. One, we redesigned how we asked for survey data. And then two, we rearranged where it was at the end. So that way we could make sure that people had a more logical flow at the end of the content. And it immediately increased their survey results, and it immediately fixed the not completing the courses. So that was one that was just kind of an easy one that came to mind that was pretty practical, and we could see it clearly with that drop off.
And here I thought you were going to talk about the accordions, and they got rid of the accordions.
I have other ones. Sean has a good one with, so Sean Putman, a colleague of mine, had a whole course. They were doing systems training, and for each part of the systems training, they had a little demo video so that you could see in the video how to do it. And they found through using xAPI data that nobody was watching the videos. So they went and followed up on it, and people said, well, the content was sufficient. I didn't need to watch the video because your instruction was good enough. So they saved hundreds of thousands of hours of development work and just didn't make the videos anymore. So it saved the company a ton of money not building videos that nobody needed to use.
Perfect.
That's really cool.
Other tales from the streets, gentlemen? Practical examples?
Alfonso?
Yeah, I will say Sarah is instructional designer. Usually instructional designers are the ones that can answer that question. I am more the one. I enable you to see what's happening, but you make the interpretation of what you want to do. So but yeah, and I think and a comment on that, and not necessarily a case, but usually a constraint or a challenge is usually when you got instructional design or your instructional design team is just a development team, and then you got so much volume of work that I need you to start getting e-learning out, and really you have no time to complete that ADDIE process and really evaluate everything. And that's the thing, a lot on the piloting when they're developing, they don't have enough time to do the piloting, and that's where really xAPI helps out when you're doing that piloting, getting the data and setting up that analytics for your pilot, and then seeing are your pilot achieving this when you give it to your pilot audience. You can quickly get in a response to that and quickly act on changing the different interactions you put in your content before releasing it to your main audience. And that should be something more common practice on the instructional design on the developer side. But if you don't have the tools, like I said, you have no awareness on the xAPI profile of your authoring tool, or you have an authoring tool that doesn't give you the ability to change the xAPI profile, you're just limited on how much you can do from your process standpoint and making it better and faster.
Very good. We are at the top of the hour, so we've kind of come to the conclusion here. Julian, first of all, I want to say thanks for staying awake, man. I mean, it's
that coffee's starting to kick in now. I think my day's just started.
Well, I appreciate you coming. I know it was you know, a stretch assignment for you, but appreciate it. Sarah, Alfonso, your practical expertise and insights I know are invaluable to our cohort. So if you can, drop by, see the chat, see if I missed anything people asked. I know, Sarah, you were pretty active in there answering some questions. So I just want to say thank you to you three for being here today and sharing all you know with the group.
Thanks, y'all. It's good to see everybody again on the interweb.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.